No race or nationality other than the white race shall use or occupy any building on any lot. This is actual language written into a housing covenant. You might assume it came from a southern state prior to the Civil Rights era, but it actually came from the Comstock Park neighborhood right here in Spokane. Though no longer legally binding since 1948, some of these covenants remain on real estate deeds today, perhaps in your neighborhood. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, an estimated 89% of Spokane County's population is white, 3% are Asian, Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, 2% are Black or African American, and 1.8% are American Indian or Alaskan Native. 4% identify as two or more races, and 5.7% as Hispanic or Latino. How did this come to be? The history of systemic discrimination in Spokane goes back to the 1800s. As more European American settlers expand west and inhabit the area that became known as Spokane, tension and conflict over land began between the settlers and ancestors of regional tribes. Eventually, federal Indian removal policies violently relocated Spokane's original inhabitants to reservations. Today, Native Americans are less than 2% of Spokane's population. The expansion west also brought the mining, timber, and railroad industries, which began to hire cheap labor from China beginning in the mid-1800s. But with pushback from the local white labor force and the enactment of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, Chinese residency in Spokane dwindled. Japanese immigrants started arriving in the 1890s, also drawn to the labor opportunities of the railroad. But in 1921, Washington State passed the Alien Land Law, barring Asians from owning land. After that, the number of Japanese families in Spokane gradually declined. African Americans began migrating to Spokane in the late 1800s. When the Great Northern Railroad brought Black workers to live in Hilliard, white workers would not let them disembark. But other African American families followed. While genocide, forced displacement, industry, and immigration policy largely dictated who lived in Spokane in the 1800s and early 1900s, by the late 1930s, a new federal policy firmly delineated the racial makeup of Spokane's neighborhoods. The Homeowners Loan Corporation graded neighborhoods into 4 categories based on perceived stability and credit risk. White homogeneous neighborhoods were rated more stable and marked green, while neighborhoods with minority occupants were marked on maps in red and considered high risk for mortgage lenders. This was called redlining. To preserve the ratings of the green category white neighborhoods, restrictive covenants were included in real estate deeds and real estate agents were prohibited from integrating neighborhoods. Although restrictive covenants were outlawed in 1948, throughout the 1950s and 1960s, many African Americans were still unable to purchase property outside red line areas or secure home loans due to real estate association rules and lender refusal to make mortgage loans in Black neighborhoods due to redlining. In 1951, the Spokane Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters and the local chapter of the NAACP protested against local realtor segregation practices. And in the 1950s, prominent African-American Spokane attorney Carl Maxey debated the president of the Washington Association of Realtors 4 times on the issue of housing segregation. In 1968, the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed, making it unlawful to refuse to sell, rent, or negotiate with any person because of a person's inclusion in a protected class of race, color, national origin, or religion. While the Fair Housing Act outlawed housing discrimination, including redlining, steering, and restrictive covenants, residual residential housing patterns and racial disparities from these practices persist, and results of those policies are still evident in residential housing patterns. Here's a map showing where most of the African American population lived in the 1960s. Here's a recent map that shows that the East Central neighborhood of Spokane is still the most non-white populated area of Spokane. Despite Spokane's relatively low population of people of color, there are large concentrations of African Americans and Asians within several apartment complexes and neighborhoods historically identified with people of color. Discrimination across housing, education, employment, and access to credit limit ability to increase intergenerational wealth. African Americans are only 2% of the Spokane population, but are overly represented in federal housing programs, including 8.6% of Section 8 voucher holders and 5% of residents in project housing. And mortgage lending data shows that people of color in Spokane usually have lower home ownership rates and higher mortgage loan denial rates compared to whites. Recipients of federal funds, such as Spokane and Spokane County, are required to affirmatively further fair housing by identifying impediments to fair housing choice in their communities and strategizing to eliminate those barriers. As Spokane's landscape continues to grow, knowing how we got here should help inform our future decision-making. Communities must use a racial justice equity lens when looking at siting, development, funding, and zoning of future housing and housing services.